Have you seen a little bag like this? It's a Sashiko and Boro style bag, and this is what we're going to make today. This piece is 11.5 by 23 and it's going to be the base. What I'm going to make is like a little Boro or patchwork design, and I'm going to lay this out and put my fabrics onto it. So all my fabrics have a honeybee theme, and so I'm just going to just look at these as I go along and decide which ones I want to use. Some are pretty small and others are bigger. I have my scissors, I have a cutter and ruler ready. I also have some little glue here because I'm going to try trying to tack this in place by just putting a little bit of glue on my fabric. I've not done that before, so I'm not sure if it'll work, but I have done it on paper piecing. So let's cut some smaller pieces from these scraps. Lay this out. This kind of a little bag, you know, you could use it for a cosmetic bag or something like that. These little bags are always useful. I'm probably going to put mine for when I go to my sewing class and just want to put some Sashiko in there to take with me. I'm just going to start and lay some of these on here and see what I think they're going to look like. I definitely want the bees to feature quite a bit on it. And when I do put them on, I will have them just laying over the edge a little bit. This one's got a little selvage on the edge there. As I come to those, I'm just going to use my rotary cutter and cut those off. These pieces don't have to be square or oblong. They can be any shape that you want them to be. These are left over from quilt making, so they are probably all going to be square or oblong though. One's got like a little honeycomb pattern on it. And I'm just overlapping each piece a little bit. So I'm going to continue to arrange these in a pattern something like this, and then I'll show you what I'm going to do next. It's a lovely sunny day here, so I hope that the sunlight isn't messing up what I'm showing you on the video here. My plan was to use this glue stick to fasten these pieces down until I sewed them. So I'm just going to show you why I've changed my mind, because when I saw that, do you see how bright that is? I was really quite alarmed at how dark it was. So when I look on the little tube here, this is just Elmer's glue. It is called Disappearing Purple. I did put that on a piece last night, but as I say, I was really worried about that purple. You know, I certainly don't want that purple showing through what I'm making. So I'm just going to move my camera a little bit and come down to this end and show you the one that I actually did glue. Let's see, it's this one. And so if I lift this up, oh, I need to move that pin. I've been pinning these down. You can see the purple has totally disappeared. But what I did discover was, because I only did one last night when I saw how dark the purple looked, as soon as I touched it, it came free. This piece of fabric is not going to be treated very gently when I pick it up and putting it on my sewing machine and scrunching it and moving it around, sewing these edges down. So I decided just to abandon that idea and just go on and put some pins in. Today I'm just working on putting pins in these pieces, and I'm just adjusting them as I go, because I do want to make sure that they overlap each other. When I pick them up, I don't want any of these pieces to drop off. I don't mind if they overlap the edges a little bit, because I can just trim those off later. And my plan is to go over them all with my zigzag on my sewing machine before I do anything else. It'll hold the edges down in place. I'm not using any fusible on this, and there is going to be Sashiko on here, but wherever I put the Sashiko, it won't quite touch every edge, and in this particular project I don't want the edges to stand up or come loose. Do you think that's a little large? I think I'm going to just put a small piece across there. That one's not wide enough, is it? Oh, it is. Yeah, I'll just put that one on there. That'll be good. So I'm just going to continue on until I've got all this pinned, and then I'll get my sewing machine out. So now I'm just working on oversewing around all of these edges. There's a lot of stopping and starting here. At the moment I'm doing the yellow. I've got the black already done. I'm going to do this little yellow piece here. Stopping here to move a pin out the way. You do have to be really careful to keep moving the pins when you're doing this. Partly because you don't want to sew over them, and also because you don't want them to stick in your fingers while you're doing it. This yellow is very pale and actually might work for some of the other fabrics. So this is a creamy colour. So I'm going to try it around there and see what that looks like. Colour for some of this more creamy fabric as well as for the yellow. That'll save me changing the thread as many times, because I did want to try and match this thread so that you will see the stitching, but it won't be as obvious, especially when I've put the Sashiko on there as well. I'm just going to continue going on around there, doing all these little sections, and that's what it'll look like when it's finished. And when I've got it all done, I'll come back and we'll do the next step. All of my sewing along the edges of the pieces is done now, and so the next thing I did was I cut a piece of batting, just slightly larger than the piece of Boro that I've made, and I'll trim that up to an exact size later. And then I pinned it all together. I'm just going to take these pins out now, and then I've put some really big basting stitches in just to hold these layers together so that they don't move. And now I can take the pins out, and I know that'll be pretty secure. Just thought this would be easier with this project. I'm going to do Sashiko on it. I've changed my mind a couple of times about what I'm going to do. I was going to do lemon thread for the Sashiko, or yellow. I sent for some and it's not arrived yet, and I want to get on, so I decided just to do white, and I'll use the lemon I've sent for something else. And the other thing was, originally I had planned just to do straight rows. I was going to draw some rows with my ruler and just do straight Sashiko. But I think it'll be nice to just have some fun with this and just do some different little straight line patterns in each of these little pieces. I'm going to start in the center and work outwards. So what I'm going to do is, for example, on this one I might just do some straight rows this way. I may do some this way, or I may do a circle or a square where I just go round and round. And I think with each square I'm just going to decide whatever I feel like doing at the time. So let's start right here with this one. And so for this one I will just do some straight lines. And some people say you shouldn't sew through the batting. I think about the original use of this, how it was used in protective clothing for firemen. I think those folks must have sewn through several layers. And I think there's always more than one way to do things. So I actually do this quite often. Sometimes it can be quite hard to draw with these heat erasable pens with batting underneath. It's soft and it doesn't give a firm surface to draw on. So if it's a problem, just do the line drawing before you put the batting underneath. And I especially would do that if it was a complicated pattern I was drawing. I think on this one, I'm going to go round and round in a box. And so I'm not going to draw all this, I'm just really showing you what my plan is. And that's probably all I'll do there. So I'm going to go ahead and start sewing that one and just decide as I go along what pattern I want to do. So I've already got my Sashiko thimble on. Got my thread knotted here. And on this one you'll see I'm actually sewing through the batting. And I've spoken before about not using this kind of batting with the darker fabrics. But for this fabric, it doesn't matter that it's this more wool blend one. The fibres are not going to be really obvious on the front if they show, in the same way they would if this was a piece of navy blue. And I'm also probably going to make these Sashiko stitches just a little bit bigger than what I typically do as well. I'll have to do less stitches too with it being through this thick batting, or it'll be too hard to pull through. Now when you do this, you actually don't have to do batting if you don't want to. You could just slip that part all together and just do the Boro part and a lining. It just depends what you want. This is just my choice. Another option would be the in-our foam. I like to use that sometimes. That would give a little bit of a stiffer finish to what I'm doing. I should talk about fancy patterns here as well. There are a lot of really nice Sashiko designs that you could use. I know you've seen me use templates on other projects, but when you're doing something like this and the fabric is quite heavily patterned, there is no point in doing a nice intricate pattern because you just won't see it. Those are really good for plainer fabrics, but on these kind of designs that I've got on here, mostly it wouldn't show. So for these kind of projects with this kind of fabric, the best thing to do is either straight lines or just random, in the way that I'm doing. And that's kind of nice actually, you can be really casual about it. And it looks like a lot of Sashiko, but this really is not going to take very long. So what do you think about the colour here? Usually when I do Boro, I've pretty much always used blue, and dark blue at that. This is really different for me to do yellow like this in this Honeybee fabric. I'm not sure if I would really think of it as Boro or patchwork. Kind of a cross between both, I suppose. But the fact that it is done in the Boro style with the Sashiko sewing on the top of it, that makes it. And I shouldn't really say Boro at all, actually. I should just say Boro style. I think when people talk about Boro, they're talking about traditional and probably quite old Japanese fabric. So I'm doing a Boro style. So if I slip up and call it Boro, just realise that I'm in Boro style. I'm just going to go and carry on doing this. Keep watching to see it finished. I want a little pocket to securely put in my Sashiko thimble, which, did you see that I was wearing that? You know, this is so comfortable that oftentimes I have it on like a ring. In fact, once I spent a long time looking for it. I may have said this on video before, and all the time I was actually wearing it. I should probably tell you to iron the fabric before you actually start cutting it. And if this was very much more creased up than this, I would, but I don't think it'll be a problem in this case. So, but probably the best practice is to iron it before you cut it. Especially fabric like this, you know, this has been folded up in a bag because it's just a scrap. Right, so I have my lining ready. I like this green, it's pretty. I'm still working on this Sashiko, on this piece of fabric that's going to be the bag, and it seems like it's going okay here. Not quite finished yet. I've done some straight lines, a hexagon there, circles. They're not really things where they're very patterned, because as I say, the patterns, they don't really show up on this kind of fabric, and it's been a lot of fun doing that. But I'm going to stop sewing for a little while here and make the lining. So when I make this bag, it's going to be almost in thirds, not quite. So I need to measure and decide just where it's going to start and end. I think about there. Looks about how I want it to be. Ouch. I've got my needle pinned in there and I just stuck my finger in it, smoothing it out. The flap is 6 inches basically. And that makes the back 8.5. And on the wrong side, I'm just going to draw a line at those points. Mark my line into the right size and fold it over, and the pocket has to fit in between that back space. So it needs to be on here, and it doesn't have to not go over that edge or that edge with it. So let's measure what size I'm going to do here. I have a little pair of blunt scissors that I carry around with me. So when I say blunt, I mean that they don't have a very pointed end, and these are good just for, you know, snipping threads. I don't want the scissors to go through the fabric, and so whatever I carry when I'm going sewing, I use these for exactly that reason. I've cut a piece of fabric. This is actually 11.5 by 13 because my pocket will be 11 by 6. So I'm just doubling this, and I'm going to put it right sides together. And now I'm just going to sew around the edge about 1/4 inch away. I'm going to leave a little opening to turn it, probably just a small opening about that. I'm just going to sew around the edge of this. I'm using a 1/4 inch seam. That's where I'm going to leave my turn opening. So from the corners off. And then I'm just turning this through to the so it's right side out. I'm just using my little corner poker here to make sure my corners poke out nice and square. It's just a pocket, but I still want it to look like they're square. And I'm just going to take this to the iron and press it. I have everything in place here. I have my pocket about where I'm going to sit it on the finished bag, and I'm going to use some Velcro as a pocket closer. I mean, you could put anything in here. You could put a zip, you could put a couple of buttons, but I'm just keeping this nice and easy, so I'm going to do Velcro. So I want to make sure these line up. So that's 1.25 inches. So I'm just going to draw 1.25 inches from this top fold. I'm moving it out of the way because it'll just get in the way of me marking the place. And I'm just going to put a line along there. And then the Velcro, I'm going to put this half on the line that I've just drawn and just cut off how much I want to use. And cut it about there. And I do want to centre that. So let me just see. An inch from that side. Well, just by pure luck, that's exactly in the centre. It's an inch from both sides. I probably couldn't do that again if I tried. I'll just probably have to hold it in place as I sew it, because I don't think pinning is going to work for this half. I'm going to sew it on the right side. So let me open that out now. And then I'll put it against that line as the guide. And the back where the sewing is, that won't show because it'll be against the bag. I'm just going to go and get my take this to the sewing machine and sew it in place. And the next thing I'm going to do is sew the other part of the Velcro to the pocket. I'm going to put it along there. And again, I'm just lining it up centrally. And I'm leaving just a little bit at the top. I'm not quite sewing it at the very top of the pocket. Now, I just need to mark the centre of my pocket. I'm going to put a pin in there to mark that, because I'm going to put a little pulling tab on there. I have a strip here. It's 4 inches by 2 inches, and I'm just going to fold it right sides together and sew down one end and the side seam. And then I'm going to turn it through. And you know, of course, this is always a little bit difficult with such a thin strip, so I'm just going to get a safety pin to help me to do that. Just finish this off with a pencil, just to push the rest of it out. Push out some corners. And then I'm just going to tuck this little end in a little bit and sew a seam along it. And I'm not going to tuck this too much with this end, because it's going to be on the inside of the pocket, so it's really not going to show very much. So let me just tuck that in, and I'm just going to run a machine stitch right on the very edge there to hold it in place. And then right where my centre pin is, let me just double that first. I'm just going to sit that over there to make a little tab. And let me just get my marking pin out from the middle there. And the reason I'm doing that is Velcro can be quite hard to get hold of and pull up, so now you've got a little tab to start it. And also, this is a long length of Velcro, and so this will just break some of the seal in the middle, making it again a little bit easier to pull up. And I'm just going to do a little stitch around there to hold that in place. And I'm actually going to just join the two Velcros together before I sew my pocket on. That'll make sure that the pocket fits exactly where I want it to. that's all meeting up pretty good, which it is. What I'll have to do is top stitch around the edge of this pocket. I'm going to put a couple of pins in just to make sure it stays in place there. And I'm going to do 2 rows here. I've done one on the very edge, and now I'm going to do one about 1/4 of an inch in. My lining's done, and so all I have to do now is put it onto my bag. All the Sashiko is done on the bag now. And so I'm just going to put these 3 layers together. Off camera, I have just trimmed the edges so that they were all straight and nicely lined up. And now I'm just putting a few pins around here to hold it in place. I'm just putting a couple of pins lengthways along here as well. Again, this is all just to hold it stable while I'm working on it some more. Alright, let me turn it over and you can see the front. I also did run an iron over this to get rid of all those iron off markings the heat erasable pen made. But it's, you know, it's all finished, they've all come off. Now I'm just going to fold this in place so you can see what it looks like. So this bottom will come up, and I'll trim that little bit off in a minute, and then the top down. And that's what the bag's going to look like when it's finished. I think that's really cute. I like that. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put a binding around the edge. So I have 2 choices here. I could just open it out, put a binding all the way around like it was a quilt, and then fold it, and then just on the inside of this binding, just sew it up, and the binding would just make a decorative edge. But I'm considering leaving it folded and putting the binding on with this folded. And my doubts about this is that this is such a thick layer for my sewing machine to go through that I'm not sure. My sewing machine is very strong. It will go through most things, but I'm not just sure that it'll go through that. So I may have to experiment a little bit and then decide what I'm going to do. I have trimmed this. I'm just going to put a little binding across the top. The strip's 2 1/4 inches wide, just like binding, and I've pressed it in half so there's a fold in the centre. I'm going to sew it onto the inside, and then the fold will fold to the front. I'm using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, just going to finger press that out a little bit. And then I'm just going to turn this over to the other side. These are going to get trimmed off, so I'll just roughly cut that off out my way. And then I'm just going to fold it there. And I'm going to do another machine dash row on this side. If you need fuller binding instructions, I do have a video that better explains this. So that's sewn, and on the other side looks like that. And now I'm just going to cut these level with the side there. I've just put my ruler on this piece because I want to make sure that this is exactly even where this folds over. I don't want it to look lopsided when it folds down. So I've put it, this is a 3-inch ruler, I've just set it along the edge, and I'm just making sure that exactly sits along the edge there like that. And now I'm happy with that. I'm just going to put some clips on there to hold it in place. This is just to make sure I get this exactly even. And I'm just going to open that and put some clips there too. Okay. Now I know that's going to be right. And I have some yellow with the bees on, and that's what I'm going to make the binding from. I really like the look of that, and if I had enough I would put that as the edge, but this was some scrap fabric that I had left over and I don't have enough to do that, so I'm going to continue to work with what I've got. I think the yellow will look fine, but the green would just have been a nice contrast, I think, especially along here where it meets. These are my 2 1/4 inch strips that I've cut for the side. I'm going to have to join them because one won't be long enough. So I'm just going to put this diagonal seam to put them together. I've ironed a 45-degree angle in this corner, and I'm just going to sew along it to make the join. Corner off. And I'm going to take it to the iron, press it open, then I'm going to fold this in half and press it all the way along. I'm ready to sew my binding on now. I'm going to fold this end in because I don't want a raw edge at the bottom of my quilt. That makes it even thicker right at the beginning then, and it's already going to be quite thick as I sew this around. I may regret this decision, but you know, I have an unpicking tool, and if this doesn't work, I'll just unpick it and sew it in a different way. So I'm just not going to worry about it too much. And that further along, I'll take that off once I get this going. And I'm actually going to let that hang over just a little bit. And at the end, what I'll do is I'll just put a few stitches to close that off at the bottom. And I think that should be, it's such a slight little overhang I'm doing here. Looks like it will be okay. Now I really am doing this like a quilt, so I'm going to stop 1/4 inch from the end and make my normal mitered corners. Turn that and sew into the corner. Cut that off. Again, if you can't see this well enough, full instructions are on the Binding 3 video. being a bit careful here. Alright, I'm just going to stop there for a minute because I have to do something at the end here which is really quite fiddly. So now I can see how close I am to the end. I'm just going to trim that off because I have to turn this end in just at this same point. I have to do that before I get to the end so I can just sew over the end. So I think it's about that much. I just want to really be careful because I want this to look nice when it's finished. Yeah, I think that'll do it. Alright. We'll do it and hope for the best. So now I'm just going to turn this all through and pin it on the other side. I am going to just iron this and then I'm going to use these clips to clip it in place. And then I'll just hand sew it because I think that'll give me the best result. So I've put clips all the way around this and now I'm just going to, on this side, hand sew around the edge there. I'm going to use this same yellow thread that I've got out here. On this corner here, and I'm just going to join together the very top layer of the fold that I put down there. Just undo that so I can draw those together. And that's just so I don't have a little bit of raw edge showing at the bottom. Just put a few stitches along that edge. Now I'm just going to sew along this edge of this binding. I want to make sure that my stitches go in below that machine row. I've moved my camera so you can see this better. So what I'm doing is directly below where my stitch comes out, I'm going into the underneath, below the machine line, coming back up and into that fold. So I'm just going to continue sewing around here. It won't actually take long. It's a little bit fiddly just because of the thickness and the bulkiness here. So I'll do that and then I'll come back and show you what it looks like finished. So it's all finished. You can see the Sashiko on there. I really like the way that comes out. Inside here, let's see, I'm trying to find what's a better angle to show you. It's a nice deep bag. There's my little tab for opening the Velcro. I've got my little pocket. I need to get in there and put a hot iron on that pink line. I haven't ironed that out. And then when I close it, just closes up. And so, you know, this would make a great cosmetic bag. I plan to use this for taking my Sashiko. My Sashiko will just fit in there, and my needle and scissors and things will fit in the Velcro. Another thought that I had while I was doing this, yellow is a very unusual colour for me. And I was thinking I have loads of different scraps. My sewing room is not a bit organised. And I'm thinking maybe I'll make more of these bags. Maybe I'll put yellow scraps in one like this, blue scraps in another one. Just the little pieces. Obviously, I've got big, yardage and things that won't fit in, but it would help me sort out my little scraps. And that would look a whole lot prettier stacked on shelves than some plastic boxes and things. So I think I might do some more of these. If you want to see more Sashiko, watch this video.